Like, yeah, it's all different.
One of the things that really surprised me, I've talked to a lot of people now, and I realized, I don't remember at what point exactly it was, but I realized that my son having an appointment made with the rehabilitation clinic before we ever even left the hospital, that's unusual. That's not a typical thing.
Yeah.
I've spoken to several people that they said, "Hey, we were at the University of Utah or Primary Children's or whatever," and they said they just discharged us.
Yeah.
And then a year later, they're struggling with all of these symptoms, and maybe it's a chronic pain thing, maybe it's executive function, maybe it's organization, maybe it's the list can go on, and I know you guys know that. But they weren't sent to the rehab clinic, and they don't have that one doctor that says, brain injury is hard and it's not just going to go away. You may have, some symptoms and consequences for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And if you have that doctor that's following you, they can kind of help you with that. But like I said, I thought that was everyone's experience because, all you know is all you know.
Right.
But as I've talked, I mean, I would say less than 20% of the people that I've talked to have actually been recommended when they were discharged from neurology or neurotrauma or the emergency department of the hospital were told, go to rehab, go see a rehabilitation doctor.
Wow.
And if there was a way, a standard way when someone's been diagnosed with a TBI to tell them, I actually spoke to someone yesterday that said she was discharged from the emergency department after an accident, and they said, well, stay away from screens, stay away from caffeine and alcohol, and just rest as much as you can.
Yeah.
Really?
And that was it.
Wow.
That was it. And she's years from her accident and really struggling with some things. And I mean, is she functioning? Yeah. But is she where she wants to be or potentially could be? I have no idea.
Yeah.
If she's, and I said, well, did you ever see, anyone in rehabilitation services? And she said, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
So if there was a way that we could just standardize just that one part.
Sure.
Yeah. Well,
and say, if you go ahead.
It seems
Sorry.
like those doctors really dropped the ball,
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I try to give doctors credit. They're doing a hard job. I mean, we joke at our house that doctors are people mechanics, but you can't see all the stuff. I mean, you can open the hood and see everything that's under there, right? You can't always do that with a person. You're making your best guess based on what they're telling you.
Well, and then you're talking about brain injuries rather than a hand injury.
Yeah.
Sure.
People look at
Break
Shane
or
sometimes and ask him what happened to his hand.
Yeah.
Well, his hand's fine.
Yeah.
It's just the connection. It's the connection between his hand and his brain that's the problem.
Right.
And it's getting better. But also, as you're talking, I think about things that Shane, has mostly found out a lot of this by just researching, it affects other things besides his hand or whatever.
Yeah.
You process things differently. Your emotions are different. And sometimes even personalities change and the way you react to things.
Sure.
But when we're in a big group and the whole family's there, sometimes Shane just has to leave and go in the other room. It's just overload too much, and there's so many different things that can happen. And you don't, I think you're like, at first, I think Shane would stay a little longer than he felt like he should, maybe, because he didn't want to seem rude or whatever. But you learn as you go. And, if you had someone that kind of tells you these things ahead of time and lets you know as a caregiver or as the patient.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Do you know how much like heartache and grief that would have saved me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or anybody out there?
Yeah.
I mean, for Shane, like, how long did you push yourself too hard? You're like,
I'm
this
still
isn't
doing
good
it,
for
probably.
me.
But then you move on. You gain your strength. You find your strengths and you build on those, because that's rebuilding your brain also in a different way, So you don't want to just say, "Oh, poor me," and go sit by yourself either. But you have to know when the limits are. And one of his doctors, he's been really lucky. He's had really good doctors, really good therapists. Really, I think I can't think of anything that I feel like was a negative along the way, and that's been lucky for him. But some of them, therapists and doctors, would say, you need to know push as hard as you can, but you also need to know that when you get to a point, you got to take a break.
Yeah.
And take a breath. And that's one thing John talked about too. Sometimes Shane doesn't take a breath. He just keeps on pushing. I mean, there's things like that
dude, you got to breathe.
but things like that you learn as you go. Obviously, you don't want to just stop and not do anything. But TyAnne, let me ask you this. You mentioned, I think, that sometimes you do help these the people that you help, that you visit with, and to navigate the medical problems too, like maybe insurance problems. Is that right? Is that something you do also?
So we do. Here's the thing. I am not an insurance expert, and I know that, but I do know how frustrating it is.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so we have tried to find some people that have some knowledge of the insurance system, and we pick their brains as often as we need to. And the really unfortunate thing is every insurance is different, just like every brain injury is different, and they all have different policies, and they all have different systems, and they all have different procedures, and a lot of the things are very, very similar, but we do try to help with that and help you to understand what your insurance is. And some of I had no idea. There's actually one insurance that they have. I cannot remember what the title is of the position, but it's basically like a policyholder's advocate. Where doesn't that sound cool?
Yeah.
And I was like, do you know how handy that would have been when I was,
Right.
Well, here's an example. So I remember with Alex, we had in our insurance, we had a policy, or in our policy, it was, you had 20 visits for any outpatient therapy service.
That sounds familiar.
Yep. And at the brain injury, you need to do a lot more than 20.
Well, here's the thing. That included physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy,
right.
cognitive behavioral therapy. That was all of them.
Yeah.
And in the very, very beginning, we had an appointment about every day. Sometimes we had 2 appointments a day, like if we had OT and speech in the same day, you know? And so that 20 visits was gone in like a week and a half.
That's right. That's
It
right.
was gone so fast.
And that's just not enough. I mean,
No.
Yeah.
Well, and
It's
then
crazy.
besides that, like early on, that's not enough at all early on. But years later, here Shane is,
Still,
7+ years out, and he can do 20 visits a year, but that's not very many. So then you turn to, in his case, John's personal trainer that he's working with now. He goes to the gym nearly every day, just to keep moving, and so everybody's got different things,
No, absolutely. Well, with the insurance thing on limiting you that way, I did not know. I didn't know for the first year, maybe year and a half, I could appeal that. And they said, okay, well, if you appeal it and your appeal is approved, we'll give you, I think it was initially like 5 more visits. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when anything that you can get, you are thrilled with, and I think it was like a year after that one of our speech therapists, I think it was the speech therapist, I might be getting that one wrong, but she said something. She's like, well, what if I write a letter for you? She said, because sometimes if the provider explains what your goals are, where they are, and what they think what the therapist thinks they're going to need, we'll see if we can get you approved for more visits. And I looked at her and I was like, you can do that? And she goes, okay, the things that you know, right?
That's right.
And she said, well, isn't it worth a shot? And I said, yes, it is.
Yeah.
So she did that, and we had a year where we had 30 visits that were covered. I think it was 30 visits. It might have been 38 visits that were covered by insurance. But to that point, anything that wasn't covered, that initial 20, after that, we paid out of pocket.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what, and I bet you guys know how expensive that is when you are paying out of pocket.
Yeah.
It adds up in a hurry, and I think neuro is more expensive than
I would
than
agree
just
with
a physical therapist.
Yes.
I mean, just from the bills I've seen, I mean, it's crazy.
So yes, we do try to help with that. Like I said, our issue is it's so different from state to state. It's so different from insurance to insurance. And, like I know the insurance that I have. When people are like, well, what do you think? What can I do? I was like, okay, this one I can help you with because I know this one.
Yeah.
I have experience with this one, but I don't, not everyone that needs help we're that fortunate with, because it's like, if they live in Florida and I'm like, I've never even heard of this insurance, and you do as much research as you can and call and talk to them and try to advocate for them. It's hard because they're all the way across the country. It's not like you can even go into an office and say, look, this is our situation. This is what's going on. How do we appeal this? Can you explain to me? Well, there's one insurance that I talked to. They're like, we don't have an appeal process. It is what it is. But it's just like that. And it's, it's a line in the sand. And I was like, really? That's it? That's all?
Thanks for your help.
Wow.
So I think that's how you hooked up with Brainstorm for Brain Injury, Shane, is through Jessie.
Yes.
Because she had helped TyAnne, right? Am I right here? Okay.
Yes.
So maybe you could just mention that or explain that a little bit, TyAnne.
So here's the really interesting. My husband really makes fun of me because I am not tech savvy at all. At all. I'm very, very bad at it. As a matter of fact, trying to get the Bluetooth to work on my headset I was like, I need you to help me. He's like, I explained how to do this. He gives me a hard time about it. He's just, it's all good natured fun. Sure. But, I hate computers. I hate phones. It's like another thing. It's just another thing I have to do. And everything that we started with on Brainstorm, just to see, is there even a need for this, or is it just me that feels this way? Was what kinds of things are going on out there? Am I just kind of living in my own little bubble and I'm struggling with my own little thing, but everyone else out there is doing fine? Because if you guys are all doing fine, I need your help. I need your resources. But if not, why don't we all work together and we take everybody's collective expertise and we share it with everybody? Because I really, truly believe that what I know is what I know, and I might be great at it, but there are tons of things I don't know. Like, otherwise I'd be able to fix my own car, right? So that was with Jessie. We met through social media. And social media, which I hate, but I'm learning to love because I'm meeting these amazing people. We just started messaging back and forth, and then it turned into a phone call. And then I think with Jessie, I even had a Zoom meeting, and we got to talking, and she said, funny you should mention an issue with insurance. She's like, I've actually worked in healthcare. And I was like, what? How is that even, and it just so happened that it was like 2 days before I had someone with a really specific insurance question. I was like, what about this? And she said, oh no, there are all kinds of ways around that. She gave me a whole bunch of different ideas.
That's cool.
So then I could go to this person. I was like, okay, here are some ideas to try. I'm not going to promise that they're going to work, but this is someone that understands insurance better than me gave me these suggestions. So here it is, and I'm happy to help you. And so that's actually how I met Jessie. And we actually have her story on our blog. And she also was kind enough to add a blog article on some of the things that have helped her in dealing with insurance. Is it comprehensive? No, it's not. She was trying to hit the high points of the things that, she thought would kind of be the most relevant and the most important, for this community. But we have the same thing with an attorney. After our lawsuit, we were able to settle and complete our lawsuit. But, in the settlement, people think, oh, when you sue someone, you're just going to walk away with buckets of money. That's not how it works, everybody. And all of that money, which was a whole lot less impressive than people always think that it's going to be, just for the record. But with that money, they didn't write that check out to me. It didn't go into my bank account. It needed to go into a trust for my son. It needed to be for his care. And that was always the goal of it. But what do I know about writing a trust? Yeah. Nothing.
Right.
So fortunately, I had the very, very good fortune of having some great attorneys, and through my husband's work, actually met an attorney that he worked with for for a couple of years, and he does estates and trusts. So we were chatting one day, and this was after our trust had been written, and I said, well, what kinds of